The paper felt ordinary to the touch, crisp, bright, perfectly aligned. But it sat in my hands like a verdict. 23 rules, typed, numbered, clipped with a tiny silver binder. Adrian Whitmore slid the stack across our walnut breakfast table the way you might slide a receipt. "This is how it's going to be," he said, eyes still grazing the glow of his phone. China clinked. Sunlight draped the new kitchen in gold, but I felt a shade drop inside me. Rule 7. You will not question where I go or who I'm with. My time is my own. Rule 12. You will maintain your appearance at all times. I will not be embarrassed by an unkempt wife. Rule 18. You will not discuss our private matters with your friends or family. What happens in this house stays in this house. We had been married for 14 hours. "Adrian," I said, my voice small enough to embarrass me, "what is this?" He finally looked up. The blue in his eyes, oceans I used to call them, had frozen over. "Expectations," he said, "a structure for our marriage, written down so there's no confusion." "These aren't expectations," I whispered. "They're controls." "Love is one thing, Arya," he said. "Marriage is a structure. Structures need rules." I wanted to laugh, to tear the paper into confetti and let it snow over his perfect suit. I wanted to run. Instead, I sat and stared at the list that claimed to govern my life and wondered when I'd stepped onto a slope, steep enough that falling felt like flying. Yesterday, I had been incandescent. 300 guests at Riverside Country Club, a string quartet mingling with Motown, peonies everywhere, soft as breath. My dress, a fitted silk, a clean line, the kind that makes you stand up straighter just to deserve it. My sister Lynn cried through the vows. My father squeezed my fingers so tightly when he gave me away that my knuckles ached with love. And Adrian looked at me as if I were the single bright thing left on earth. That was yesterday. Today he looked at me like a junior hire who needed onboarding. "I need to head in," he said, pushing back his chair. "Read through those. We'll discuss any questions tonight." He paused at the mudroom door, as if remembering an errand he'd almost forgotten. "And sign the bottom." He left. The smart lock beeped. The house hummed. Our house, the one we'd chosen 3 months ago, with the south-facing windows and the ridiculous pantry. I looked down at the line waiting for my signature and the date, as if I'd stumbled into a contract I hadn't read. Rule 1. Dinner on the table at 7 p.m. Sharp. Rule 4. Do not enter my office without permission. Rule 9. Attend family and business functions with a smile, regardless of your personal feelings. My phone buzzed. "Michelle, how's married life? Everything you dreamed?" Rule 18 pulsed like a neon sign in my head. Don't discuss our private matters. Were these private matters or alarms? 6 months ago, I met Adrian at a gallery opening I was photographing for my design portfolio. He approached like a man used to doors opening for him, polite, charming, curious about the camera in my hands. We talked 2 hours. Dinner the next night. Weekends that bled together. At 3 months, he asked me to move in. I said no. Too fast. He smiled and said, "I know what I want, and I want you." 2 weeks later, he proposed with a ring that made me blush when I looked at the price. My parents liked him. He was successful, composed, old money without the sneer. His mother, Evelyn, was cool to the touch, like something kept in a velvet-lined box. But I told myself she'd warm up. We planned a whirlwind wedding in 8 weeks because he didn't want a long engagement. The speed felt romantic until it didn't. Upstairs, water hit tile. Adrian showering in the marble bathroom with the towels he liked from the brand he chose. I folded the paper, slipped it into the pocket of my robe, and stood very still until the rush in my veins receded. I wasn't going to sign. I also wasn't going to fight now. I needed time like a diver needs air. By 10:15 that night, I had plated dinner, cleaned dinner, and stared at dinner. When Adrian finally came home, he glanced at the congealed food and said, "I already ate. You could have called." "I would have, but Rule 7, remember? I'm not supposed to." He cut in, almost gentle. "Did you sign?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it isn't normal." "You are my wife," he said, stepping closer until I could count the flecks in his irises. "You need to understand how this family operates. Tomorrow you'll understand better. My mother is coming by. I didn't sleep. I lay beside a man I thought was home and listened to his even-breathing tick like a metronome for a future that wasn't mine. Tomorrow, he'd promised. He kept that promise. Evelyn arrived at 11. I heard the heel strikes before I saw her. Then the front door swung open like a verdict. "Where is she?" she called, and the air went brittle. I wiped the nervous palms on a dish towel and stepped into the foyer. Evelyn stood in a cream sheath with a strand of pearls that belonged in a museum. She looked like someone who had seen a ghost and decided to outstare it. "Evelyn," I said carefully, "is everything all... Do you know what you've cost us?" Her laugh had no smile in it. "The Thornhill merger. 20 million evaporated because my son married you instead of Camille." Camille. Cold slid down my spine. He'd mentioned a Camille once. Just a colleague. "Who is Camille?" I asked, though dread already had the answer. "Camille Thornhill," Evelyn said. "Randolph's daughter, the woman Adrian was supposed to marry, engaged for 2 years. The union of Whitmore Investments and Thornhill Holdings? Then you." "I didn't know," I said. "He never told me he was engaged." "Of course he didn't. He said he was in love." She tasted the word like something sour. "We assumed the fever would break. It didn't. He married you. Randolph pulled out. 20 million, Arya. That is your price." My knees wanted a chair, but pride kept me vertical. "If Adrian was engaged, he should have told me." "I wouldn't. It doesn't matter now," she said, closing the distance until her perfume braided into my breath. "You are in this family. You will behave accordingly. You will not embarrass us. You will follow Adrian's rules. Do not make a bad situation worse. You knew about the rules." "Structure is essential," she replied with the calm of a surgeon sharpening a scalpel, "especially when one party is upwardly mobile." There it was. I was the girl who came from a mechanic and a public school teacher and a small house with a chain-link fence. Community college to state school, the kid who hustled. In Evelyn's taxonomy, I was a fingerprint on their crystal. "I need you to leave," I said, quiet, steady. "Excuse me." Her eyebrows arched like twin guillotines. "This is my home." "You have no idea what you've started," she said, eyes gone to polished stone. "Adrian will make you understand, and when Camille returns, and she will, you'll realize you never stood a chance." She left, the door booming behind her. For a long minute, I stood in the quiet, holding a towel and the urge to scream. Engaged. My husband had been engaged. To a woman his mother fully expected to return like a comet with the next financial season. I opened my phone with shaking hands and typed, "Camille Thornhill." The photos rendered instantly. The glossy blonde, charity steps, yachts, gowns that looked like smoke. 3 months ago, a photo with Adrian, a gala, his hand on her waist in a way that once felt sacred. "A perfect evening with perfect company," the caption read. 3 months ago, after he proposed to me, 2 weeks before our wedding, a charity dinner, 2 glasses of champagne, his profile angled toward her mouth. The bathroom tile was cold under my knees when I vomited. When the heaving stopped, I rinsed my face, and on the way back to the bedroom, I noticed his office door wasn't fully latched. Rule 4. Do not enter my office without permission. I placed 2 fingers against the wood and pushed. Adrian's office looked like a magazine spread, orderly, expensive, airless. File drawers glided open with a hush. Receipts, contracts. In the bottom, a matte black folder with no label. Emails, printed, highlighted, stapled. "Camille, we can still fix this. Call off the wedding. Tell her it was a mistake." "Adrian, it's too late. But we don't have to end. The marriage is for optics. You and I continue." "Camille, what are you saying?" "Adrian, I still want you. I'll explain her place after." The thread unraveled back over months. Meetups, hotel rooms, calendars that intersected in places my life didn't exist. From the driveway, the soft cough of his car. I photographed everything. Front, back, staples, slid the folder back exactly where it had been, and sat on the couch with a magazine I wasn't reading when the door opened. "You're home early," I said as casually as I could manage. "My mother came by," he said, watching me watch him. "She says you were rude." "She told me about Camille," I said. He didn't flinch. "That was business." Business took you to a hotel 2 weeks before our wedding? I asked, flipping my phone to show him Camille's public photo. A work event. And these? I asked softly. The emails. His jaw flexed. You went into my office. I did. Rule 4. I don't care about your rules, Adrian. My voice surprised me by not breaking. You married me while planning to keep someone else and decided I'd accept that with a smile. You need to calm down. It's not an affair if I told you not to ask questions, he said, almost bored. You had fair warning. I stared at him. Why marry me at all? He smiled then, and it was worse than anger. Because I wanted to. Because I could. Because I was curious how far you'd go. And in that surgical bright second, the whole structure revealed itself. The wedding as theater, the rules as shackles disguised as etiquette, Evelyn as usher, Camille as headliner. He thought he'd break me with discipline and drip-feed humiliation. He'd miscalculated the material. Okay, I said quietly. Surprise darted across his face. Okay? You're right, I said, dropping my eyes to hide the wildfire behind them. I'm your wife. I have your name. I live in your house. I understand reality. He relaxed. Good. Then we move forward. We move forward, Mum, I echoed, and that night while he slept with one arm thrown over his face like a boy worn out by camp, I opened my laptop and began. Not a divorce petition, a plan. For 2 weeks, I performed the role of perfect wife so cleanly even I wanted to applaud. Dinner at 7 on the dot, lipstick at family dinners, smile at business functions. No questions, no flinches, no tells. Adrian relaxed into carelessness. Notifications flashed across his phone. He stopped turning it over. His calls drifted from careful to careless in the next room. Tonight was perfect, read Camille's text. Little pink hearts I wanted to crush under my heel. Next week, coast. I documented everything. Times, dates, charges. Receipts from restaurants I'd never set foot in. Suites booked under his name. Jewelry I never saw. He was spending our money on her. Legally, some of that was mine. One night while he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. No passcode. That was how confident he was that the rules had tamed me. Miss you already. Can't wait for Charleston. 3 days of no rules. I opened his calendar. Charleston, business trip. 3 days he'd be gone. 3 days I could breathe. I forwarded the texts and photos to a fresh email I'd created for exactly this purpose. Cleared the outbox, set the phone down precisely where it had been, and went downstairs to brew tea with hands that shook from fury, not fear. Divorce would wound him financially. It would not destroy him. Men like Adrian considered money a language they were fluent in. What they feared was being unmasked in the language everyone else understands. The next morning, while he was at the office, I opened his again. Swiftly, precisely, like a pickpocket. I stopped looking for Camille and started looking for math. It didn't take long. Money moving in loops that made no business sense. Expenses without correlates. Wire transfers through shell entities with names designed to disappear. A contract with a man named Gerald Ashford, $3 million for a real estate development, Adrian to manage and split profits. Bank statements right beside it showed the money hopscotching through accounts and then gone. 2 more investors with similar contracts. The pattern was so clean it looked like a template. I photographed everything. Every page, every routing number, every signature. His car again, earlier than expected. I reset the scene and met him upstairs folding shirts. Back later, he said, changing into something more casual. Don't wait up. When the door clicked behind him, I uploaded the files to a secure cloud, cloned them to 2 flash drives, taped one under my car's spare tire, and tucked another into an old photo box at Lynn's. You seem stressed, my sister said, searching my face. Just adjusting. Call me, she said, squeezing my shoulders. Anything. Middle of the night. I mean it. That night, lying beside Adrian, I understood 2 things with glacial clarity. He lied in every register a person can lie, and I had evidence that could be a match. I needed kindling. I started reading articles about Whitmore investments, old deals, splits. One name repeated, Bradford Hayes, former partner. They had launched a venture firm together 5 years ago. 2 years in, it dissolved. Publicly, different visions. Privately, an interview with Bradford from 3 years back made my heart tilt toward hope. Some people build, he'd said into the reporter's mic. Some people take. I learned which one Adrian was. I stared at the screen. If there was someone who knew precisely how Adrian operated and wouldn't flinch, I'd found him. It took me 3 days to dial. Hayes Consulting, the receptionist said. My name is Aria. Aria Tran Whitmore, I said, swallowing the taste of that new last name. I need to speak to Mr. Hayes. It's about Adrian. A pause that felt like a held breath. Please hold. A beat later, a calm, low voice. Bradford Hayes. I'm Adrian's wife, I said. I know who you are, he replied. I saw the announcement. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, the word brittle. That's not why I'm calling. I need to talk to you about the kind of man he really is. Silence then. Riverside Cafe. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone. If Adrian is with you, I walk. He won't be. Good. He hung up. I stared at my phone, wondering if I had just picked the lock or set off an alarm. The next morning, I told Adrian I was going shopping. He didn't look up. I parked 3 blocks from the cafe and circled twice on foot because paranoia is just diligence with better shoes. Bradford was already seated in the back corner, where he could see the door and the street through the window glass. Tall, composed, black, with the kind of presence that quiets a space without asking permission. Aria, he said, rising. Coffee? Yes, thank you. He let me speak first. I told him about the list of rules, about Camille, about the contracts and the bank statements and the money that vanished like a magician's scarf. I slid my phone across the table and watched his eyes move as he scrolled. Quick, surgical, impersonal in the way of a man who'd learned to separate rage from strategy. Do you have all of this backed up? He asked. In 3 places. He nodded once. Good. Gerald Ashford is a decent man. He lost almost everything when that money disappeared. He tried to sue. Adrian's lawyers bled him out on motions. Bradford tapped the screen. These 2 others? I don't know them yet. I can find them. So what? Go to the police? We will, he said, but not before we've locked the evidence and the victims in place. Financial crimes take time. You get one clean shot before a man like Adrian scrambles the board. What do you need me to do? Be exactly who he expects you to be, he said. The perfect wife, no sudden moves. Meanwhile, I'll reach out quietly, and I'll bring in a lawyer who does nothing but white-collar work. Someone who can package this so a DA can't ignore it. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, then back up. One more thing, he said. If you meet me again, do it smarter. What do you mean? My office is secure, he said. This cafe? Your mother-in-law drove by 20 minutes ago. The coffee turned to ice in my stomach. She saw me. Maybe, maybe not. But assume yes. I nodded, throat tight. I'll get a burner. Text me the number from that, he said. From now on, we don't exist to the rest of your life. I left first, walking past the florist like I might buy peonies if this were a different story. I drove to a strip mall 3 neighborhoods over and bought a cheap phone with cash. No loyalty card, no email, nothing. In the parking lot, I texted Bradford the number and tucked the phone in the spare tire, well beside the flash drive. I drove home by a different route and walked in through the side door like I'd forgotten my keys and my name both. Adrian was in the living room scrolling. Where were you? He asked. Shopping, I said. I told you. Show me what you bought. I didn't find anything, I said too evenly. I had lunch instead. Which place? The salad bar on 5th. He stood. My mother says she drove by Riverside Cafe this morning, he said. She thought she saw you with some man. My blood went cold, but I kept my face bored. I wasn't at any cafe. She doesn't lie. Then she was mistaken. Or she wants to be, I said, letting the smallest ribbon of heat into my voice. She doesn't like me, Adrian. He studied me like a specimen. Finally, if I find out you're lying, there will be consequences. I'm not lying. We stared at each other. He broke first, looking back down at his phone with the dismissiveness of a king bored by a peasant. Be more careful, he said. People watch us. Our reputation matters. Hour, I repeated, tasting the word and filing it away as evidence. I went upstairs and closed the bedroom door with careful hands. My pulse finally stuttered back toward normal. The burner buzzed in my car that night when I snuck down with a bag of recycling as cover. Bradford, assume surveillance. No more public meetings. Lawyer identified. I'll update when it's safe. Me, copy. I'll play the part. I powered the phone down and slid it back into its hiding place. In the darkness of the garage, the house loomed above me, big, beautiful, and hollow as a stage set. I pressed my palm to the cool metal of the car and made a quiet promise that tasted like iron. You wanted rules, Adrian. Here are mine. For the next 14 days, I wore my smile like armor, and my silence like a blade I hadn't unsheathed yet. I learned the choreography quickly. Dinner at 7, laughter at the right octave for his partner's crude jokes, lipstick that Evelyn couldn't complain about, dresses that said decorous in every seam. I set reminders for his preferred wine temperature, memorized small talk about golf courses I'd never stand on, and nodded as if synergy were a sacrament. I became fluent in the dialect of successful men who think they're the weather. Inside that choreography, I worked. The burner phone lived in the car, powered off in the dark space above the spare tire beside the flash drive. When the garage door rolled down and the house swallowed Adrian's attention, I stepped into that private night to check for texts. Bradford, found contact info for Ashford. Meeting discreetly tomorrow. Bradford, second investor. Thomas Chin, medical devices. Left bleeding from a promise of returns that never materialized. Bradford, third, Richard Sterling, real estate attorney, conservative, hates publicity, will require careful approach. Bradford, lawyer secured. Patricia Vance, 20 years in white collar. She'll vet every document. The next morning, I put on a yoga set, tossed a mat into the back seat, and told Adrian I had a late class. He gave me a dismissive thumbs up without looking away from his phone. I drove to a strip of river trail I'd never used before, parked under sycamores, and turned the burner on long enough to receive one more message. Patricia, I'll need originals or clean scans of contracts, bank statements, email metadata, images of text threads captured with timestamps. Can you get more? Me, yes. Patricia, good. Also, keep your routine normal. Don't trigger his suspicion. No public confrontations. No threats. If he senses a shift, he'll torch the evidence. Me, understood. At home, I reviewed my list of his rules, the ones he typed and the ones I'd learned watching him. He saved receipts, filed them himself, and hated mess. He paid for everything with the same 2 cards. He took calls for the real work in his office. He flirted in the hall. He was loyal only to habit. That loyalty would be my lever. I eased his office door open during a 20-minute window when I could hear the shower upstairs. I pulled out the matte folder and the ash gray one beside it, placed my phone on silent, and photographed everything across both. Contracts, wire memos, bankers' emails, internal expenditure memos that were nothing more than fancy labels for theft. I moved with the precision wrung into me by years of photographing other people's art. Light, angle, no distortion, no shadows. By the time steam billowed onto the landing, the folders were exactly where they'd been, and I was in the kitchen rinsing blueberries as if I'd been there all morning. He kissed the air near my cheek and told me he'd be late again. Don't wait up. I won't, I said, and meant it as a promise to myself, not acquiescence to Rule 7. That afternoon, Evelyn called. I watched her name bloom on my screen and let the call sail to voicemail. Her message came through cold. Appearances matter, Aria. If you plan to remain part of this family, you will learn to appreciate counsel. I deleted it. Counsel from a woman who would feed me to a deal? Pass. 2 days later, Bradford texted the burner. Ashford is in. He'd met Gerald in a private room at a quiet steakhouse. The man had brought a cracked leather portfolio bulging with letters demanding answers and records proving none were ever given. The lawyers had bled him by the sheet of paper until he couldn't fund truth anymore. Bradford. He's angry and careful. That's a good combination for us. Me. What about Chin and Sterling? Bradford. Working on Sterling through a friend he trusts. Chin responded to my outreach in 8 minutes with, and I quote, "Tell me where to sign." Meanwhile, I stocked our life with immaculate normal. I went to bear class and actually sweated. I took Evelyn's obligatory call at 4 p.m. every other day and answered her temperature checks like a meteorologist. Yes, we'll be at the gallery opening. No, my dress won't be too loud. Yes, Adrian likes the roast I made. Thank you for the recipe. Remember the charity gala in 4 weeks, she said. Adrian will be honored. Of course, I said, though my heart felt like someone had just drawn a circle in wet cement. I knew a stage when I saw it. That night I told the mirror I wouldn't blink on one. The private investigator appeared 3 days later. Or rather, he materialized into my awareness like a watermark beside our curb. A black Audi with windows too dark for this neighborhood, parked 2 houses down, present each morning and gone by midnight. The first day I waved with ridiculous cheer as I carried out recycling. The second, I walked across the street to ask our neighbor if she'd had trouble with unfamiliar cars. The PI adjusted, parking farther down, then around the corner, then back again as if we were playing hide and seek like children. I gave him nothing worth finding. Grocery aisles, a manicure, a cup of tea with Michelle in a crowded cafe on the other side of town where patrons were too busy with their own gossip to notice mine. The burner buzzed that evening. Bradford. Assume eyes. We're moving faster. Patricia. I've reviewed preliminary scans. We have fraud, multiple counts of embezzlement, wire fraud, and likely tax issues. But I won't go near the IRS until after the DA files. Keep everything off your personal cloud and off your household Wi-Fi. I created a clean digital trail. New email. New cloud under a new alias. Images watermarked with cryptographic timestamps. I put copies of everything in 3 places: my car, Lynn's apartment, a safe deposit box in a bank across town, where the teller didn't ask questions because my hair looked like money that day and my voice sounded like I had somewhere better to be. Adrian's carelessness became its own tempo. On Tuesdays, his lunch ran long. On Thursdays, he came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine and smoke dude that wasn't his. On Sundays, he had golf meetings that lasted 4 hours. The course's tee sheet said otherwise. He used the same boutique hotel for months because men who consider themselves kings prefer home fields. I had enough to destroy a marriage on paper. But what we were building was a case to end an empire in a room full of its patrons. 2 weeks into this quiet war, Bradford sent a message that made my ribs expand for the first time in days. Bradford, Chin and Sterling are in. Patricia has them scheduled for sworn statements. DA's office is interested. They want the package airtight. We'll do it their way. Also, she has an idea you'll like. Me. Tell me. Patricia, you mentioned the gala. If we control the screens in sequence, we can force the room to see what we need them to see before security can sanitize the narrative. Public shame accelerates cooperation, but it's risky. Your choice. I stared out at the yard, grass we'd never set foot in together, a white fence Adrian had insisted on because the comps have it. I thought about the list he'd pushed at me over breakfast, the line waiting for my signature like a trap door, the way he'd said, because I could in that cool voice men use to hide the boy inside. I thought about Evelyn's pearls clicking like teeth. I thought about Camille's caption, perfect company. I want the room, I texted. Patricia, then we need a signal and a way onto the stage. Me, he'll want me dressed like a trophy. I'll be there near the front. If I adjust a bracelet, can you take the screens? Patricia, done. I'll have a tech in the booth who owes me favors. We'll lock the AV the moment you give the signal. Bradford, investors will stand and confirm after you speak. DA gets the package the moment the room sees it. I exhaled, a deep, clean breath I hadn't taken in weeks. I slept for 4 hours that night. It felt like a holiday. Adrian told me to buy a red dress for the gala because he liked how I looked in danger. I went to the most expensive boutique in the city and tried on 6 versions of power. The one I chose wasn't just red, it was decision. I charged it to his card, added shoes that felt like weapons, and booked hair and makeup with a woman who understood that softness sometimes needs an edge. When the package totals hit the credit card, Adrian smirked. Good girl, he said, as if I were a pet returning a stick. Inside, a part of me smiled back. Teeth, not lips. Patricia scheduled a run-through in her office. 20th floor, glass walls that let in a river of sky, security downstairs that asks for IDs with the kind of tone that suggests you know better than to lie. Bradford waited with coffee and a tablet. Patricia stood by a screen with a folder in her hand like a conductor about to lift her baton. "We keep you fact-forward," Patricia said. "If you cry, they'll call you hysterical. If you rage, they'll call you vindictive. Calm is power." We went slide by slide. Bank statements, wire summaries, contract excerpts, emails between Adrian and Camille. The marriage is optics, you are my real life. Receipts that tied stolen funds to hotel rooms and jewelry. And then the map, the one that traced investor dollars through a lattice of shells to personal accounts and back out again to a life stripped of its price tags. When I stumbled on a date, Patricia stopped me. "Again," she said, "no stumbles, not on numbers." We rehearsed until the words felt like muscle. When we finished, she sat, satisfied. "You can do this?" "2 weeks," Bradford said. "Keep your head down. If he hired a PI, and he did, he'll get bored if he sees you doing Pilates and buying farmers market strawberries." "I can be boring," I said. "Be ordinary," Patricia corrected. "Boring trips people's alarms. Ordinary is invisible." On the way home, I texted Lynn to remind her of the alibi for my spa day. She replied with 20 exclamation points and 3 hearts. I pulled into our driveway to find Adrian's car already there. "Where were you?" he asked, casual like a dagger in the ribs. He was on the couch, glass of something amber in his hand. "Spa," I said, and held up the bag with a tiny bottle of face oil I'd bought on the way back for exactly this purpose. "With your sister?" His eyes never left mine. "Alone," I said, putting just enough boredom into my voice to make him yawn. "My mother called your sister," he said. "She hadn't heard from you." "I never said I was with her." I let a little confusion bloom on my face, then embarrassment, then a shrug. Miscommunication. He watched me for the length of one slow sip. "Maybe we should have someone keep an eye on your schedule," he said finally. "Maybe you should keep an eye on your own," I thought, and said nothing. The next morning, a black car idled again at the end of our street. I went for a jog in the opposite direction. Deliberate ponytail, deliberate pace. I stopped to tie my shoe under a maple and counted to 30. When I lifted my head, the car was gone. I laughed out loud. Even shadows get bored. Nights, Adrian moved through the house like a man rehearsing for a better audience. He appraised his reflection in the hall mirror longer. He made small adjustments to his lapels, as if tiny tweaks in cloth could rewrite character. He said things like, "The Whitmore name is a responsibility, and we must protect the brand," as if we were a cereal. I did what Patricia said. I became ordinary. I folded laundry and watched a cooking show. I took a bath with too much lavender and read a paperback that made me snort. I texted Michelle safe things. I wrote Lynn the real things and then deleted them instead of sending, saving the words for when I could say them out loud without burning everything prematurely. 12 days before the gala, a small thing happened that mattered more than it should have. My hands stopped shaking when I touched the burner phone. Bradford texted updates I didn't have to reread twice to understand. Patricia sent a draft of my statement with the kind of edits that turn truth into a blade. Patricia, this line, "He treated me like property." Keep it, but place it after the numbers. Lead with what the room can't argue with. End with what they can't forget. Me. Got it. Adrian stood behind my chair at dinner one night and told me to order more of that Pinot the partner's wife liked. "She's influential," he said. "She decides who's worth sitting with." "Does she decide who's worth stealing from?" I asked in my head and smiled with my mouth. 2 days later, Camille's face floated across my phone. An algorithmic suggestion based on proximity and pain. She was at a luncheon with women whose teeth matched. The caption, "Honored to support the foundation." Adrian wasn't in the frame, but I could see the edge of his cuff in a mirror behind them, a small white lie peeking out from behind their smiles. I screenshotted it and saved it with the others. Not because it would help the DA, because it would help me if I ever doubted what I was doing. A week out, Patricia texted the details that made my throat tighten. "Patricia, DA will have the warrant ready to file within minutes of the presentation. They'll move as soon as the room sees the evidence. If security removes you early, Bradford will finish the sentence into a hot mic. Investors will stand. You will not be alone on that stage. Me. Thank you, Patricia. Also, no heroics. If someone grabs the mic, let it go. The slides will keep running. Truth doesn't need your throat to get out. The night before the gala, I lay awake in our bed and stared into a darkness that felt almost like peace. Adrian's breath sawed gently at my shoulder. I could have turned and watched him sleep, traced the features I'd once found beautiful, tried to locate the junction where a man becomes a mask. I didn't. Love is a story we tell with our eyes. I wasn't interested in writing fan fiction for a villain. Sleep well, I whispered instead, not unkind. You'll need it. The day of, I woke early and made coffee as if it were a ritual that blessed a house. I wrote my last email to myself from the burner, a list titled After, with items like change locks, close joint utilities, call bank about fraud alerts, book therapist appointment. Building a life requires blueprints. So does dismantling the old one. At noon, Bradford sent a final check-in. Bradford, we're in place. Tech is ours. Investors briefed. Lawyer ready. You okay? Me. Yes. Bradford, you're not doing this because you were humiliated. You're doing it because he steals for sport. Say the numbers like they're street names. Then tell the room who lives there. Me. I will. I showered, blow-dried, let the stylist's hands turn my hair into architecture. I fastened the bracelet, thin gold, easy to touch without making a scene. I slipped my notes behind the clutch's silk lining and didn't intend to need them. At 6, Adrian looked me up and down and nodded approval, like an owner reviewing a car brought around front. You look expensive, he said. Thank you, I replied, and thought, you do too. It's going to cost you everything. We drove in controlled silence to the country club, light pouring low across the parking lot like honey. Inside, a small industry of money and favor worked the room. The hush just before a bid. Laughter like silver. Handshakes that felt like contracts. Evelyn moved through it all like a flagship. Pearls bright, smile precise. Aria, she said, air kissing my cheek. You look, appropriate. Thank you, I said, because that cost me nothing and saved me time. The Ashfords are here, she murmured to Adrian, and the name dropped into my stomach like a coin into a well. Avoid him. I'll handle Gerald, Adrian said, the confidence of a magician who forgot where he hid the dove. Candles glittered. A string trio streamed something polite. The stage waited, skirting lit, mic poised like a throat clearing. I excused myself to powder my nose and walked a line that didn't go to the restroom. A security guard stepped from the curtain. Backstage is restricted, ma'am. I'm Whitmore's wife, I said, the smile I'd practiced for other kinds of doors. He asked me to add a line. Quick, the guard said, stepping aside because security is human and humans still surrender to tone. Patricia looked up from the control booth, our eyes meeting across the low light. She gave a small thumbs up. Bradford stood at the wings, hands folded, jaw set, not as a man ready to fight, but as one ready to hold a line. The MC began the opening patter. Names, numbers, a joke that smoothed the room. My heart slowed down as if it knew we were stepping into a place where adrenaline was only going to get in the way. I waited at the edge of the curtain, red silk pooling at my feet like a warning flare. And now, the MC was saying, we honor the visionary leadership of... I stepped out before my name could be used to decorate his. Good evening, I said into the mic, my voice steady enough that it surprised me a little. My name is Aria Tran Whitmore. I'm Adrian's wife. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something everyone in this room needs to see before you celebrate the man you think you know. 1,000 eyes pivoted, 1,000 breaths held. Somewhere, a fork paused just above a plate. I adjusted my bracelet. In the booth, Patricia's tech took the system. The screens behind me blinked, then flooded with white. The first slide landed like a gavel. Over 5 years, I said, Adrian Whitmore took $8 million from investors and moved it through shell companies to fund a life he did not earn. Here is how. And then I did what Patricia had taught me to do. I took them through the streets, account to account, contract to wire, date to date, line to line. I said numbers like addresses. I said names with clean enunciation. I watched recognition crawl across faces as math unmasked myth. Security was already moving. Bradford stepped to the edge of the stage, good as his word. In the audience, Gerald Ashford rose like a verdict. "She's telling the truth," he said, voice carrying. "He stole from me." Two other men stood, one I knew by research, one by the color draining from Adrian's face. "From me! From me!" The room tilted toward noise. I stayed calm. The final slide appeared. Text between Adrian and Camille. Receipts that tethered stolen money to private indulgence, not business necessity. "And while he did it," I said, never looking at Evelyn, never giving Camille the dignity of a glance, "he handed me a list of rules the day after our wedding and told me that was structure. This," I pointed at the screen lit with the arteries of theft, "this is structure, a structure of fraud." Security reached me. I let go of the mic like it was nothing, because it was. The slides kept running. The truth didn't need my throat. The room had eyes, the DA had the packet. The rest would move like weather. They led me to a side room where Patricia was already packing her folder. Bradford followed with a hand on the door like a hinge. "The police are on site," Patricia said. "The DA filed. They'll move now." "Are you okay?" Bradford asked. "Yes," I said, and I was surprised to discover it was true. "I'm steady." We stood together in a wash of quiet for the space of 10 slow breaths. Somewhere out there, the life Adrian had polished was cracking like varnish in sun. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was learning what it feels like when your pearls aren't armor. Somewhere out there, Camille was discovering her taste for men didn't run to felons in handcuffs. When we stepped into the corridor, a uniformed officer walked past, his radio crackling. "Subject in custody." Patricia smiled without showing teeth. "Let's go," she said. "The media will be here in 10 minutes." The screen on my phone lit with messages I didn't read. Outside, the evening had the luminous quality of a storm that broke over someone else. We walked to Bradford's car, and the air felt different in my lungs. Lighter, like a door had been opened in a house I'd been trapped inside without knowing it. In the tinted reflection, I caught a glimpse of myself. Red dress, hair pinned, face calm, eyes bright. Not a victim, not a rule follower. A woman who had chosen a stage and then used it. I slid into the back seat and finally let my body sag into the leather. "He'll post bail," I said, "because realism is a habit you don't break in one night." "Maybe," Patricia said, "but not tonight." Bradford met my eyes in the rear view. "You were perfect," he said. "Calm as power. You just ended a man in a room full of people who thought they'd never see an ending." I nodded, pressed my palms together, and felt for the first time in weeks the deep, quiet certainty of a plan that had met its moment. "Take me home," I said. "Then tomorrow we can talk about what comes next." In the dark window beside me, the woman who looked back didn't belong to anyone's list of rules. She wrote her own. The squad car's taillights were still red ghosts in my eyes when Bradford dropped me at Lynn's place. She pulled me into her doorway like I was a hurricane siren she'd been listening for all night. We didn't talk much. She shoved a glass of water into my hand, tucked me under a quilt that smelled like orange peels and clean soap, and sat beside the couch until my breath stopped sounding like I'd run a race I hadn't trained for. I woke up to a text from Patricia. "Patricia, judge set morning hearing. DA will argue no bail. Keep still. No press comments." Me, understood. By 9, every local station had my name in a lower third. By noon, my inbox was a landslide. The doorbell rang 3 times before Lynn taped a piece of paper over the peephole and texted our neighbor to collect the packages reporters were accidentally leaving. At 11:15, Patricia called. "The judge denied bail," she said, voice brisk and pleased. "Pattern of deceit, flight risk, access to funds. He'll remain in custody while we negotiate." I let the words touch the parts of me I'd kept held back for 2 weeks. "Okay," I said, and my voice sounded different, looser. "Now comes the boring part," she continued. "Discovery, charging documents, depositions. You won't need to be in the room for most of it. I'll ping you for anything that requires your signature. And Arya," "Yes?" "You did exactly what needed doing. Take a shower, eat a real meal, and, if you can, sleep far away from that house. I'm not going back, I said, surprising myself with the certainty lining each syllable. Not even to pick up a mug. Good, Patricia said. I'll have a locksmith and a marshal accompany my team next week to inventory and secure what the court will seize. You owe that house nothing. The following days were a strange mix of noise and silence. Outside, the world devoured the shock. News anchors with careful eyebrows. Think pieces about charismatic fraud. An op-ed that mentioned my red dress more times than the words wire fraud. Inside, Lynn's apartment held a sanctuary made of ordinary things. Omelets that slid from the pan whole, laundry folded warm, her snorting laugh when a sitcom landed a joke too obvious to deserve it. Evelyn called twice. I didn't answer. Her voicemail was a rosary of blame. You humiliated this family. You could have handled it discreetly. You never belonged to us, and now we have to live with what you've done. She set us like a country club that had to lower its dues because the pool cracked. Camille sent a single sentence. I hope you're satisfied. I blocked the number and poured the last of the coffee over ice. Bradford kept our messages simple and clean. Investors holding, DA expanding scope. We're okay. Each time, a small knot unspooled under my breastbone. 3 days in, the DA announced the formal charges. Multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The press conference played on Lynn's TV while we assembled a low bookcase from a flat pack. When the prosecutor said systematic theft masked by curated charm, Lynn handed me the tiny Allen wrench like a baton. You're going to need this for the next part, she said. Building a life is mostly small screws and bad diagrams. I laughed then, really laughed, for the first time since Adrian slid that list across our table. It sounded like it belonged to me. Patricia scheduled my formal statement for the following week. Her office felt like a place where people finish hard things. I told my story into a recorder and watched my hands fold and unfold on the table without shaking. Numbers lined up like streetlights. Names became waypoints on a map I now knew by heart. When I finished, Patricia clicked the recorder off and sat back. I've had clients disappear into revenge, she said matter of fact. They win the battle, then live in the war. You don't have to do that. I won't, I said. I want closure, not residency. Good. She slid an envelope across the table. Draft divorce terms. Clean break option is fastest. No alimony either direction. No claims on seized assets. You walk in 30 days. No alimony, no assets, no blood money. That's what I want. We'll file today. I signed my name slowly, savoring each loop like a vowel I'd reclaimed. The house emptied in 2 waves. First came the court's people, marshals and a quiet, efficient woman with a clipboard who cataloged every object as if it were evidence. And in a way, it was. I stood in the entryway for exactly as long as it took Patricia to read me the inventory protocol. The stairs looked steeper than I remembered. The light in the living room felt artificial, even with the curtains open wide. I left the list of rules in the nightstand, tore it in 2 with a calm I'd earned, and slid the halves into a sealed evidence bag. When the clipboard woman raised an eyebrow, Patricia murmured, "Context." The second wave was strangers, carrying out items that had once signaled success. Watches cushioned in velvet, a Persian rug with its own biography, art from a gallery opening where I had learned the scent of cultivated money. Watching it go, I felt nothing except a strange gratitude for the clarity of emptiness. We drove away in Patricia's car. I didn't look back. I had other things to see. Bradford met me at a cafe with brick walls, real plants, and the quiet hum of people doing work they were proud of. He slid a folder across the table. Before you say anything, he said, this can wait a month, or 6, or forever. The folder held a logo, Hughes and Tran Consulting, and a simple offer letter. Starting salary that made my stomach lift, health insurance, a line about mentorship that didn't smell like paternalism. You want me to join you? I said, uselessly accurate. I want the woman who built a case in a house full of cameras to teach my firm how to see what's hidden, he said. Start where you want. Stop if you don't like it. We'll keep the seat warm while you rebuild. I don't want a warm seat, I said. I want a chair with wheels and a view. He grinned. We have those. I took the folder home, placed it on Lynn's kitchen table, and stared at my name in a font I'd never have chosen but suddenly loved. I had once thought my life would be a gallery of other people's choices, curated by a charming thief. Now it looked like a blueprint drawn in my own handwriting. I started 2 Mondays later. Work woke the muscles I'd let atrophy while memorizing a stranger's rules. My first week, Bradford tossed me a due diligence file on a wearable tech startup with a charismatic founder and a suspicious burn rate. I read everything twice, asked the accountant on our team to carve out the line items that didn't speak, and called 3 former employees whose references had a coded quality. By Thursday, we had a picture. A company that wasn't fraudulent so much as adolescent. Bad at truth, worse at math. Our client passed. A month later, the startup's founder posted a thread about haters. 6 months later, an SEC inquiry arrived in his mailbox with his name spelled perfectly. "You have instincts," Bradford said after our first debrief, "and you have discipline to match them. Most people only get one." "Most people haven't had to thread a needle while being watched," I said, and he nodded like a man who understood the weight of curtains. Patricia called with updates that felt like chapters slamming shut. The plea deal negotiations wound tight and then held. 8 years with the possibility of parole after 5, restitution structured through asset liquidation, and a long tail of payments that would follow him like a shadow. I chose not to attend the hearing. I wrote a victim impact statement that ran 1 page, single-spaced, printed cleanly on the kind of paper Adrian would have approved. "You tried to replace partnership with policy," it read, a line Patricia underlined. "I replaced your policy with public record. That's not revenge. That's correction." I mailed it. I didn't watch him open it in my head. The divorce finalized in 23 days. A clerk stamped a paper. Patricia texted a gavel emoji and a champagne bottle because even counsel knows the language of relief. I walked out of the courthouse alone and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph, not even joy, just a deep, quiet rightness, like a bone slipping back into joint. That afternoon, I toured a small, bright apartment with windows that faced a park instead of a golf course and a kitchen that admitted it was small without apologizing. The landlord asked for references. I handed him 2 and a letter from my employer. He gave me the keys and a smile that didn't look past me to a man who wasn't there. I bought a mattress off the floor and a table small enough to eat at without feeling like I needed guests to justify it. Lynn brought over a pothos plant that made the window look like optimism. On my first night there, I cooked an omelet badly and ate it on the floor with my back against new white paint. I slept without dreaming. Sure, the world tried to keep its claws in. Evelyn wrote me 2 letters on stationery with the family crest embossed at the top, as if wax could give words authority. The first letter demanded I recant the spectacle. The second tried, clumsily, to recruit me as a co-victim of Adrian's hubris. I returned both envelopes unopened with "No, thank you" written across the flap. It felt deliciously childish and perfectly adult. Camille's name brushed by occasionally in an article about reputation rehab, or a photo from a charity event that looked smaller than the ones she loved. Once I saw her in a department store, lingering over a glass case of bracelets, her reflection split by the metal bars into neat pieces. She didn't see me. I kept walking. Indifference is its own perimeter. At work, I moved from file to file, client to client, finding patterns where other people saw static. I found that truth has a cadence, stutterless, consistent, and scam has syncopation where it shouldn't. Bradford started tossing me the harder cases. A family office with an heir who thought offshore meant invisible. A founder whose resume contained schools that didn't exist. A nonprofit whose ED treated grant disbursements like a tasting menu. We built reports that didn't just say no, they said here's why. Clients sent cookies and contracts. My inbox switched from "Are you the red dress woman?" to "Can you join our call tomorrow?" Somewhere in there, my posture changed. I caught myself in the elevator mirror once, chin up, shoulders back, and thought, there she is. On a Tuesday in late spring, Bradford stood in my doorway with 2 coffees and a grin the size of a promotion. "We need to talk about title," he said. "You're not an analyst anymore." "Senior," I guessed. "Director," he said, "with a path to partner that's measured in months, not years if you want it. And I think you do." Want, I said, laughing. I barely remember how to spell that for myself. But yes. He set the coffee down and leaned his hip against my desk. Also, for what it's worth, the night at the gala, the way you stood there, we've gotten 3 clients who watched you do it. They trust a person who is calm in a storm. I was terrified, I said. You were steady, he said. That's what people remember. The sentencing hearing arrived like weather you've seen on the radar for days. Inevitable, gray, without surprises. I didn't attend. I read the coverage later, sitting cross-legged on my little couch, eating cherries. 8 years. Restitution. The judge saying, you've treated honesty like a costume. The court prefers uniforms with names on them. A photo of Evelyn's pearls blurred by motion. A shot of Adrian's jaw. You could still see the boy who stole from the cookie jar and convinced the nanny to take the blame. I closed the article when it tried to tell me who I was in relation to him. I already knew, and the category was unrelated. Lynn and I celebrated the end of a chapter with ramen and a movie so silly it washed the last courtroom taste from my tongue. Later, back at my apartment, I opened a box I hadn't touched since Patricia sealed it. Wedding photos. The veil I'd kept because silk doesn't know a lie when it drapes over one. The shoes that had bitten my heels bloody beneath the hem of a dress that tried to make me into a princess in a story written by a wolf. I took out one picture, me and a stranger cutting a cake with a knife I should have kept, and slid it into an envelope labeled archive. Not on the wall, not in the trash. A truth, not a shrine. 3 months after sentencing, an email arrived from a name I didn't recognize. Gerald Ashford, followed by a domain that sounded like people who build things that last. Ms. Tran, it read, this is overdue. Because of you, I got 70% of my investment back, which was 70% more than I expected. More importantly, I got my confidence back. I'm building again. If you ever need a favor I can deliver, ask. If you never do, know this. There are men in this city who stop talking when your name is mentioned because they remember the night you taught them numbers can be louder than applause. G. Ashford. I read the email twice and then forwarded it to Bradford with a single line. Let's keep building companies thieves can't steal from. He wrote back. That's the tagline. Life found its new perimeter in mundane things that felt miraculous because they came without conditions. On Saturdays, I ran the loop around the park and waved at the same woman walking a dachshund who hated his raincoat. On Sundays, I burned pancakes and ate them anyway. On Thursdays, Lynn came over for dinner and fell asleep on my couch watching a show where people remodeled kitchens that weren't broken. I started therapy because closures have back doors. I learned my nervous system like a language I'd always spoken but never diagrammed. The therapist, kind, incisive, with shoes I envied, helped me map the difference between vigilance and attention. We talked about power and rules and how patriarchy cosplays as structure when what it really is control. We laughed more than I expected. We cried less. One evening on my way out of the office, I ran into a man by the elevator who looked familiar in the way newspaper photos do. He was tall with an accountant's posture and a runner's calves, holding a paper cup with a lipstick mark that didn't match the way his mouth moved when he smiled. Area Tran, he said. Yes, I said carefully. I'm Derek Lane, he said, Sterling's cousin. We met at, well, you didn't meet me. I saw you from across a room where you were busy ending a dynasty. His smile tilted. I wanted to buy you a coffee then, but you had police on your side, and I didn't want to compete. I laughed. It came out like a small bell. Good instinct. May I take my shot now? He asked, gesturing to the cafe downstairs. No cameras, no gala. Just coffee, I said. Just coffee. It was at first. He asked questions that didn't center him. He told stories with the self-editing grace of someone who knows conversation is a duet, not a solo. He didn't flinch when I mentioned therapy, or Lynn, or the plant I kept almost killing. When he walked me to my car and didn't reach for anything but the door handle, my body stayed quiet, a new kind of relief I hadn't known to want. We dated slowly, like people who can read a calendar and a heartbeat at the same time. 2 months in, he said, I don't need your pain to be impressed by you. It was the softest sentence anyone had ever handed me. I put it somewhere safe. Summer slid into its late golds. Work expanded. Bradford floated the word partner, and I caught it with both hands. We rebranded quietly. Hughes and Tran on the door, on the letterhead, on a sign in the lobby that made my stomach fizz the first time I saw it. On the morning the sign went up, I walked into the empty lobby and touched the cool metal of my name. I thought of the first day I'd walked into Patricia's office with a burner phone and a plan made of nerve. I thought of the bracelet signal, the room, the way numbers had looked 10 feet tall. I thought of Lynn's Allen wrench and the flat-pack bookcase that didn't wobble when we were done. "Congratulations, partner," Bradford said from behind me. "Thank you," I said, "for seeing me as more than a headline. You made it easy. Sometimes it felt like I was making it up as I went." "That's what building is," he said. "We just don't usually have an audience." A letter arrived from the prison in early fall. I recognized the tidy block letters even before I flipped it over. I carried it to my kitchen table, made tea I didn't drink, and opened it because closure doesn't always come in forms we prefer. "Aria," it began, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't get to. I'm asking for the courtesy of an audience you can deny in your mind if you wish. I did what I did because I believe structure was control and control was love. It's not. I'm learning the difference slowly in a place where rules are not the same as accountability. You didn't ruin me. You revealed me. For that, I am angry at you and grateful to you, which is the strangest combination I've ever felt. I hope your life is quieter than the one I gave you. Adrian." I folded the letter in thirds and slid it into the archive box with the wedding photo and the program from the gala. Not on the shelf, not in the trash. A truth. He existed. Another. So do I elsewhere. Better. That night, Derek cooked in my tiny kitchen like it was a stage big enough for a show. He burned the garlic. I teased him. He stole a kiss that tasted like basil and apology to the pan. After dinner, we played a game where we planned trips we weren't taking yet. Lisbon, Kyoto, a cabin somewhere pine-scented and quiet. He traced a circle on my palm with his finger. "What are your rules?" he asked. It wasn't a joke. It didn't land like a threat. "I don't have rules," I said, and then corrected myself because growth likes precision. "I have agreements, with myself first." "Such as?" "Tell the truth sooner. Leave when the price of staying is yourself. Don't confuse attention with care. Wear the red dress even when there's no stage." He smiled. "Those aren't rules. Those are a life." "Exactly." We washed dishes shoulder to shoulder, music low, window open to a city that sounded like sirens and laughter at once. The plant by the window had revived into a cascade of new leaves. I set an extra hook in the ceiling to hold it when it grew heavier. Planning for weight felt like love. When Derek left, I stood in the doorway and watched him wait for the elevator, his hand raised in a little farewell salute. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it for a second, not out of sadness or relief, but gratitude. For a door I locked, for a night that ended where I wanted it to, for a life that fit. I walked past the table with my laptop and the neat stack of files waiting for morning, past the couch Lynn fell asleep on, past the plan I was keeping alive. I brushed my fingers over the bracelet in the dish by the sink and smiled. A signal once. A souvenir now, not of him, but of me. In the mirror above the small bathroom sink, the woman looking back wore no crown and no armor. She wore soft cotton in the posture of someone who can carry her own name without assistance. Tomorrow there would be clients and numbers and a meeting where Bradford and I would argue about whether a founder's optimism was a rounding error or a red flag. This weekend there would be pancakes that still burned and a run in the park where the dachshund would bark like a car alarm at a skateboard. Next month there might be Lisbon. Or not. Either way, there would be coffee and a pair of shoes I'd decided were worth the splurge. My phone buzzed on the counter. A calendar alert. 1 year since. Rules. I opened the event, smiled at the title I'd given it in a moment of gallows humor, and changed it to 1 year since. Voice. Then I turned the alert off entirely. I didn't need a reminder to know where the story had been. I turned out the lights, climbed into a bed I'd chosen, and fell asleep fast. Somewhere far away, a man I once married lay awake under fluorescent hum, learning the difference between structure and confinement. Somewhere else, a woman I had once almost been was standing on a stage, adjusting a bracelet, choosing her own ending. Here, in a little apartment with plants and bad pancakes and plans, I didn't rehearse anything. I lived. The first morning Lisbon was really Lisbon. The light marched through the tiled alley outside our rental like a brass band with velvet shoes. I opened the window and the city answered in espresso steam and gull calls, laundry lines and the click of someone's heels on mosaic stone. Derek was still asleep, one arm flung over his head, the sheet crooked at his waist, an expression that made him look like a boy who'd finally learned to dream without alarms. We had promised each other no itineraries that feel like performance reviews, so the plan was nothing more than a list of neighborhoods and an index of what we felt like. I brewed coffee in a tiny stovetop pot and leaned against the sill, sipping and thinking about the strange geometry of time. How a year can feel like a locked room, and then, after a single hinge gives, you step out into an avenue with room for a parade. When Derek stirred, I set the cup down, went over and kissed him awake. "Good morning, partner," he mumbled, eyes still soft. "Wrong partner," I said, smiling. "But thank you for the promotion." He cracked one eye. "Hughes and Tran called twice while you were in the shower." "Liar." "A little," he admitted, stretching. "Today let's be off duty." We were. We spent the day failing at pronouncing street names with grace, eating custard that tasted like a secret, and sitting on a hill while the city rearranged itself under the river wind. At sunset, a woman with a guitar sang a song whose language I didn't understand, and a meaning I did. That days pass, that people leave, that the light is still obligated to show up and show off. Later, back in the apartment, my phone buzzed once. A courtesy vibration I'd set for 2 people only. "Bradford? Bradford. Just signed the Atlanta lease." "You were right. It already feels like we've been there a year." Me. "Bring me a tile for the wall. One that looks like a pattern we could trust." Bradford. "Copy that. Design director of my life." I locked the phone, slid it under a book, and let Lisbon keep all of me. That was the shape of my days now. Work held fully until it was time to set it down. Love picked up without hands shaking from other fights. When we got home, the city greeted us with an autumn that wore its golds like jewelry. The Hughes and Tran lobby sign still shocked me. A back-of-the-throat little gasp each time, though my stride had folded it into the rhythm of my body. Our Atlanta office sent pictures of a potted plant in a crooked first-week coat rack. I ordered a level and overnighted it because crooked is charming in cafes, not in companies. One weekday morning, with the rain performing scales on my windows, I received an email from an address at the State University. "Dear Ms. Tran, we run a speaker series for seniors transitioning into the workplace. Your story and your work would be invaluable. Would you consider giving a talk about ethics and due diligence? We're not asking for the red dress story, unless you want to tell it. We're asking for the blueprint you built after." I read it 3 times and felt the old queasiness that comes with being seen because of the worst thing that happened to you. Then I noticed something in their phrasing, after. The preposition mattered. I said yes. I called the talk Blueprints Beat Spotlights and wrote it the way I write reports. Short sentences, clean subheads, no unnecessary heroics. The auditorium smelled like HVAC and notebook paper. I stood at a lectern that had seen 1,000 small beginnings and said, "The most seductive frauds don't look like movie villains. They look like competence with a calendar. Don't be afraid to ask for receipts. Don't be afraid to leave when the price of staying is yourself." I told them about pattern recognition, about how truth repeats calmly, how lies improvise a little too much. I told them about power that says structure when it means control, and about the 2 questions that live on a sticky note above my desk. Who benefits if we don't look? Who is punished if we do? I gave them a list of boring habits that make bright lives. Scan the footnotes, call the receptionist instead of the VP, ask the janitor how the place really runs. Sleep. During the Q&A, a young woman with a high bun and a voice like she's been told to speak smaller raised her hand. "How did you know you were allowed to leave?" The question slid into me like a blade, and then became a heat source I didn't know I carried. I didn't, I said, honest. I left anyway. Afterwards, students lined up with notebooks and phones. Some wanted a selfie, one wanted silence. She handed me a sticky note that said only thank you for saying leave. A young man in a sweater vest told me he'd been raised to think rules were love. Sometimes they are, I said, but not when they're only for you. Derek waited in the lobby with flowers that looked like the sun had done you a favor. You were, he started. Steady? I teased. Steady, he said and kissed my temple. And generous. We walked out into the rain and didn't run. It felt good to be the sort of damp that comes from choosing to stay in it. Evelyn wrote a third letter in December. This one was smaller, as if she'd moved into a place with fewer drawers. My bridge club reads your name in the paper and says they knew. They didn't. None of us knew. I chose not to. Don't mistake that for ignorance. It was preference. There was no apology in it, but there was a sentence I underlined before I slid the paper into the archive box. Preference can be a sin. The handwriting wobbled. Age is a particular kind of indictment. I did not reply. I owed her nothing. I owed myself silence. At work, I gave a junior analyst my old chair. It's got good luck baked in, I said, rolling it over. He laughed like he didn't believe in that sort of thing, and then 2 weeks later, he closed a case that had stump-sat 3 directors. He wheeled past my door and tapped the seat twice as if we shared a secret. We did. It wasn't about the chair. Bradford and I built a new intake process out of the questions I'd taken to carrying in my throat. Does this client want truth or do they want reassurance? Will they fire us if we find what they hired us to find? We learned to say no to money that came with fog machines attached. Our balance sheet grew slower and better. One afternoon, the receptionist pinged me. There's a Gerald Ashford here with a man named, she paused to read the clipboard, Thomas Chin. They don't have appointments. They brought pastries. Send them in, I said, standing. They had the look of men who'd seen 7 kinds of weather and learned what to wear in all of them. Gerald hugged me like someone who respects consent and had received it. Thomas bowed his head slightly and said, You kept me from dying of embarrassment. That doesn't show up on a restitution schedule. They set the box of pastries on my conference table like a peace offering. When we opened it, the smell was butter and apology and Thanksgiving all at once. We're investing together now, Gerald said. Imagine that. We wanted your eyes on our first 2 deals, Thomas added, and our gratitude on record. We spent an hour drawing circles on a whiteboard, turning hopes into hypotheses. After they left, Bradford leaned in my doorway with his arms folded. You realize you've done something unusual, he said. You took people out of a war and got them to build a neighborhood. Neighborhoods have rules, I said. His eyebrows went up. They also have agreements. Touché, I said, and wrote our new policy on the board. We don't protect clients from truth. We protect them with it. On a cold night made of glittering sidewalks and breath-like small clouds, Derek and I went to a holiday market where the vendors sold soap that smelled like forests and hats that made everyone look like their own cousin. A woman at a booth of hand-lettered prints watched me reading a set that said things like, Pay the invoice you've been avoiding, and rest is not a prize. It's a part. You look like someone who used to collect rules and now collects recipes, she said. Guilty, I said, smiling. What are you making, she asked, meaning life, not stew. A company that refuses to confuse charisma with character, I said, and a home with too many herbs and a man who hates burnt garlic but will eat it for me. She laughed and handed me a small print I hadn't read yet. It said, Build where you can reach the lights to change them when they burn out. On the back she wrote, For Aria, who knows maintenance is love? I didn't remember telling her my name. Maybe it was written on my face. On the walk home, Derek slipped his hand into my coat pocket. You know, he said, we haven't said the thing. What thing? The vow thing. We're not married, I said lightly and watched his face for a flinch. There wasn't one. We don't have to be, he said. I'm not angling for an aisle. I'm saying, maybe we write our kind of vow anyway. Not for an altar, for a fridge, for a Tuesday. We stopped under a streetlight that made the snow look like the city had sprinkled sugar on itself. Okay, I said, let's try. When we got home, we stood at the counter and wrote on the back of an old electric bill because promises don't require stationery. We agree to tell the truth sooner, especially when it's small. We agree to leave rooms where we're unkind to ourselves or each other, and to come back different. We agree to keep the door open to quiet. We agree that no one is in charge of the other person's peace. We agree to make pancakes even when we burn them. We agree that red dresses are for weekdays too. We signed it with initials and taped it to the freezer because that's the door you open when you want sweetness in a hurry. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I felt an alignment I'd been drafting toward without naming. The spring after Lisbon, the university asked me back, this time to teach a short seminar. 3 Fridays, 2 hours each, 12 students who already knew how to Google and needed to learn how to listen. On the first day, I gave each of them a single sheet of paper. At the top, one sentence. Write down a rule someone gave you that never fit and the agreement you'll make with yourself instead. They bent over their desks like they were sheltering candles. A young man wrote, "Don't cry," and then, underneath it, "I agree to feel things and call it human, not weakness." A woman with ankle boots that meant business wrote, "Stay small," and then, "I agree to take up space and apologize for it," 0 times. They shared. We nodded. We turned each sentence into a practice with metrics and mercies. On the last Friday, one of the students, bright eyes, stubborn jaw, lingered after class. "My boyfriend gave me a list of expectations," she said. "They weren't as bad as yours, but the last one said I shouldn't have male friends." "What do you think?" I asked. "I think I'm tired of thinking in his voice," she said. "I think I want to hear mine." "Then you already know," I said. She took a deep breath. "I do." After she left, I sat in the empty classroom and listened to the echo that remained. Chairs scraping, pencils snapping, hearts making room. I thought of the morning after my wedding and the first time I said no out loud to a piece of paper. It had felt like moving a mountain with a teaspoon. Now no felt like a full word that could hold a house. A year slid into 2. The archive box grew heavier while the need to open it thinned. Hughes and Tran hired 3 more analysts, women and men who had learned to mistrust glitz and not to resent glow. We opened Chicago. I flew there once a month to walk the floor and say the sentence that had become our firm's spine: "We are not fortune tellers, we are flashlight people." Derek and I furnished our home with chairs you could linger in, a table that insisted on elbows, art by people whose names we'd learned over wine at tiny galleries where the owners poured too much and charged too little. We fought, of course, about dishes, about a trip he booked during a week I'd earmarked for quiet, about a joke that landed wrong. But the fights looked like weather reports, not indictments. We would make tea, turn the vow on the freezer into a checklist, and get to work. We always came back different. On an ordinary Wednesday, my therapist asked, "Do you want to write a letter to your past self?" "No," I said immediately, and then, after a breath, "But I'd like to write a memo." We both smiled. She handed me a legal pad. "To Aria, holding a list at a table that smells like dark roast in control. From Aria, who knows where the light switches are now. Subject, survival and then some. You're not crazy. Your body is correct. Keep listening. This isn't love, it's architecture built to keep you small, because small is easy to inventory. There are people who will believe you on the first sentence you say. Find them. Keep them. Keep the photos if you want. Throw out the rules even if you have to archive them first. You will be steady on a stage and silly on a couch. Both will be yours." I folded the memo and slid it into the archive box with intentional ceremony, like setting down a cornerstone. On the 3rd anniversary of the gala, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. A breath, a pause, a voice trying to figure out what shape it was allowed to take. "Area," Adrian said. "I heard you talk on the radio." They played a clip. "We are flashlight people." It was good. That's all. I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of policy. The past is a place with tourist hours now. You can visit briefly. You cannot move back in. That night, Derek and I took the tile Bradford had brought from Lisbon and hung it above the stove. Blue scrolls, a pattern that looked like structure without control. I stood on a chair and held the tile while Derek leveled it. Left, I said. Half a hair. He adjusted. The bubble centered. When he stepped down, we looked at what we'd made centered and held. Looks like a vow, he said. It is, I said. Everything we maintain on purpose is a vow. He kissed me with a kind of certainty that used to scare me when it came packaged as possession. This was different. This felt like I had my hand on the steering wheel, too. Curry summer again. The park's dog population expanded by 3. I learned the names of 2 and the indifference of one majestic corgi who treated me like a cabinet unless I had snacks. I burned pancakes less and less. The plant by the window needed a bigger pot, a gentler hand, more sun. I gave it all 3. It rewarded me with a cascade that brushed my shoulder when I cooked. Maintenance. Love. Love. Maintenance. On a Tuesday that looked like any other, a young associate knocked on my door with a file and a face that said, "I know this smell." The client was charming. The numbers were not. "He's got a list of culture non-negotiables for employees," the associate said. "Reads like a romance with control. Let's write him the truth, Arnanom." "Pirasamin, Doctor," I said. We did. We wrote a report that said no politely and precisely. The client fired us, then hired us back 2 months later when his CFO quit on a Zoom call mid-sentence. We weren't smug. We were steady, flashlight people. When the day ended, I walked home through a city that had once felt like someone else's set and now felt like my backdrop. Our building's lobby smelled like lemon and distant curry. The elevator groaned the way it always did. In our apartment, the vow on the freezer had a coffee stain on it from a morning neither of us had been graceful. It made me love it more. Derek was at the counter, chopping herbs with a concentration that would have made a surgeon jealous. He looked up, smiled like his face had decided it wanted to, and said, "How was the day?" "Good, I said, toeing off shoes that looked like respectable decisions. We said no to a man who thought charisma could be amortized. "My favorite sport," he said. We ate with our elbows on the table and told each other the kind of details people dismiss as small talk, and I have learned to recognize as intimacy. After dinner, I stood by the window and watched night fold itself into the skyline. The tile above the stove caught the last light and threw it back, undramatic and adequate, the exact measurements of most of life. Derek came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Tell me a story," he murmured. "Once when," I said, "a woman bought a red dress for a gala because a man told her to look expensive. She wore it like armor, and then, when the armor was no longer necessary, like joy." "What did she do next?" he asked. "She built a company where rules were replaced by agreements, where power was measured in how gently it could be held, where numbers were light sources, not weapons." "Did she live happily ever after?" "She lived deliberately ever after," I said. "Happiness came and went like weather. Deliberate stayed." We stood there until the last line of light went flat. Then we did the dishes because vows are most visible in the kinds of evenings no camera would volunteer to film. I don't think often of the morning after my wedding now. When I do, it's not to reopen the wound. It's to honor the woman at that table, hands trembling around 23 printed lines and a pen that wasn't hers. I don't rescue her in my mind. She rescued me. She picked the lock. She stepped onto a stage and used numbers like a chorus. And she kept receipts, made allies, made plans, made a life. If I could stand behind her shoulder, I would whisper, not the details, not the plot points, but the tone I wish someone had lent me. "You're allowed. You can. You will. And later, when you no longer need permission, you will give it away like water." Here is the truest thing I can say on a night that smells like cilantro and rain, with a tile above my stove and a vow on my freezer and a man in my kitchen who knows how to level things without needing to be taller. I did not win because he lost. I won because I stopped playing his game and built a different one. A life made of agreements, not rules. A life where my voice is both instrument and conductor. A life where the title on the door and the name on the mailbox match the person who answers. Tomorrow I'll wake up and run the loop and wave to the dachshund, and I'll go to an office where the sign says Hughes and Tran and the work says, look closer, and the people say thank you by doing their jobs well. I'll stop by the university and pin a new handout to a corkboard. I'll buy flowers that look like the sun. I'll text Lynn a photo of my plant's newest leaf, and she'll reply with 12 heart eyes because she was there when all I had were stems. I'll pull a red dress on a Wednesday for a meeting that deserves my whole presence. I'll come home to a kitchen that needs sweeping and a man who kisses me like the day asked permission first. We'll eat. We'll laugh. We'll disagree and edit our freezer vow with a new line if we need to. We'll go to sleep with the window open because it's finally the kind of night where the city sings lullabies. No list on the table. Just a bowl of lemons, a stack of mail, a print on the wall reminding me to build where I can change the lights when they burn out. And if the phone buzzes with a past I no longer owe, I'll let it hum until it quiets. Because this is how it's going to be. My way, our way, steady, deliberate, luminous enough to see the next right thing. A different kind of vow, kept.